So I want to continue on in the theme today of the Google memo and its fallout and controversy, and I want to talk about meritocracy, and I want to talk about the instability of meritocracy. And I got into an argument online with a libertarian guy, and he made a snarky quip about, hey, remember that time the Apollo moon craft crashed because its computer software wasn't manly enough? And this is a reference to Margaret Hamilton, I think her name was. She was a computer programmer. She was pretty hot shit back in the 60s, when it was still pretty patriarchal, pretty sexist. And she apparently was some kind of hot shit programmer. And she wrote a lot of the software for the Apollo lunar spacecrafts. And, she was a big deal. She managed a team of software engineers or something like that. And an extreme outlier from MIT, I believe. I could be getting some of the facts wrong, but basically, that's what you need to know. And she wrote a lot of this stuff, and the idea being that there are some women who are qualified to do this kind of stuff, or capable of doing this kind of stuff. And first of all, that's not an argument against discrimination, because there was discrimination and prejudice then, and she was still able to succeed. So, if she's really that hot shit, she'll probably be able to succeed anyway. And, so that's not really an argument against discrimination and for meritocracy. But the idea is that what matters are individual qualities and not aggregates. But aggregates do matter, because even if there's some, set of women, there's overlapping distributions between men and women in certain traits, and even if there's some set of women, who in some sense, or in some dimension, if they're, let's say, more masculine than some of the men, then if you accept those women into those roles that some of those men are filling, then you've made that environment less masculine, because these women may be more masculine in some ways than some of the men who are filling those roles, but they're not more masculine than most of the men who are filling those roles. And so by admitting them into those roles, you're making those roles less masculine and more feminine, and you're changing the culture in those workplaces or wherever to make it more feminine. So you are having an aggregate effect, and it's, by admitting women into those roles, you're making those roles more feminine, and you're making those environments more feminine, and you're making those cultures more feminine. So there is an aggregate effect, and that's going to change things. Like feminine women are more agreeable, and that's what all this PC stuff is about, is pathological agreeableness, and they're more risk averse, and so they're less tolerant of risk, and they're less tolerant of controversy and conflict and competition and all of these things that are tremendously important in some of these environments, right? We want to harness competition. We want to harness competitiveness. We want to harness controversy in order to improve things. And yeah, there's some risk to that, and there's some contention and some conflict, and men are better and more willing at handling that kind of risk and that kind of contention and that kind of conflict and that kind of competition. And so, if we're creating a more feminine workforce because some women are qualified or meet the minimum basic qualifications or requirements here, then we really are changing the culture, and we really are changing the workforce, and that's going to have effects. And so, the workforce, the next iteration is going to be less tolerant of those risks and less tolerant of those controversies and that competition. And so the next iteration is going to be more politically correct, let's say. And so you start down this slippery slope. And yeah, maybe there's some gains to realize in the short term by accepting more people, more qualified people who meet the minimum basic requirements for the job, or who meet the, who are, let's say, more masculine than some of the people that you have in the job currently. All right, whatever. So, it seems silly to exclude them individually on that basis because of those aggregates, but those aggregates do matter. And also, the problem with accepting outliers and what's the word? Exceptional individuals, outliers, anomalies, is it weakens your resistance to the non-outliers, to the non-exceptional. So it's like, okay, you have this exceptional woman doing this job in software development for the Apollo program, and she's hot shit, and she's really good at it, and her contributions are invaluable. And then it's like, oh yeah, why not let women do shit like that? Why not hire a bunch more women? She worked out great. But, she's the top 10th of 1% of her field, of her gender. All right, so she's not representative. So you let a bunch of other women in, and even though she thrived in a masculine environment and, maybe a sexist environment in some ways, these other women are going to be a bunch of fucking whiny bitches. And they're going to agitate constantly to change the culture and to change the workplace environment in ways that are more suitable to them and to their sensibilities and to their high agreeableness and their high neuroticism and, to their low risk tolerance. They're going to agitate to change the environment in ways that are suitable to them, that are more advantageous to them, and that are harmful, and that are unsuitable, and that are unadvantageous to the males who also contribute to the project or to the products or to the goals of the organization, right? And you don't want to sacrifice all that just to get a few more women, especially if they're not outliers, if they're not exceptional. And so it may not be worth making those sacrifices or imposing those costs on the males or the masculine values in order to obtain more women for those roles. It's probably not worth it, as a matter of fact. And, but this exceptional woman who was capable of succeeding in that environment and was capable of, mastery of that subject matter, she was the foot in the door. She was the example that weakened the resistance of everyone who is acquainted with that example to the idea of just no, let's not allow it. Let's just tell them no because they're women. And that seems unfair if there are some individuals that are capable of it, and maybe more capable than some of the individuals that you have in that role now, or more suitable. But a categorical interdict can be more enforceable than a, let's say, more nuanced and hypothetically more ideal policy or more optimal policy. If a categorical imperative is, enforceable and durable, it can be the better policy over the long term. Whereas if you have a more nuanced policy, it's like, okay, this one woman did it all right, so we'll allow more. But then, now the culture starts to change. And now the people have become more feminized. And so there are more demands and there's more agitation for measures that alienate men and degrade masculine values. And there's more push for more women to get involved because these uppity entitled bitches, don't like the masculine culture and they don't like the masculine coworkers. And so they want more female coworkers and they want more female culture. And this is what they're agitating for. All right. So it's a foot in the door and it's a slippery slope and it gets worse and worse and worse. And, this idea of meritocracy, that meritocracy requires you to accept someone who demonstrates an ability for the job, and that's what meritocracy requires. It's really self-defeating because, it's a really narrow definition of merit that allows them to, that allows you to say that that person has the merit to succeed at the job and therefore they deserve the job or they deserve to be considered for the job. It's a really narrow definition of merit because if they don't fit into the existing culture or if they're going to clash with the people who are already in that job, then maybe they're not the best candidate for that job. Even if they have skills and qualities that might suit them to the work or whatever, if they're going to clash with the culture or with the people who are already around that job, then they're not the best fit for that position. They're just not. And so that's a really definition of merit. and is kind of evaluating it out of context. And furthermore, if you are accepting this principle, then you have to admit unmeritocratic people just because they demonstrate merit. So a feminist only has to demonstrate merit. She only has to demonstrate, direct job-related skills in order to get the job. And bam, now you have a feminist in there, and she's going to start agitating for other considerations besides merit, besides skill. And so by not shutting her out, you have opened the door to this cascade of, unmeritocratic reforms. You have opened the door. You have initiated this cascade of feminization, of emasculation, that's not going to stop, because they're not going to stop making demands. They're not going to stop demanding representation. They're not going to stop demanding jobs. They're not going to stop demanding accommodations. They're not going to stop demanding that masculine values and males be suppressed in those workplaces to make them more comfortable, to be more conforming to their sensibilities and their values, and a conformity that will alienate males and masculine people and will degrade masculine values that are important, like competitiveness. So it's really opening up the door to just a runaway, slippery slope cascade of feminization and effeminacy. And, there's no reason to start down that path. There's no reason to start down that path. So my response to this guy was, hey, remember the time we let a woman program a moon computer just because she could? And a generation later you could get fired from the largest tech company in America for suggesting that maybe it's not worthwhile to give out 51% of all jobs, tech jobs, to women. So, he's totally ignoring the context of how that meritocracy turned out before. We tried it because we didn't go right from sexism and patriarchy to fucking matriarchy, runaway matriarchy. We didn't go right from A to Z, right? There were steps in between. So what did we try? We tried the fucking meritocracy thing. We tried as long as you can do the job. All right, we fucking tried that. That was where we started, because it seemed unfair to exclude people from the job who seemingly could do the job. And maybe it is unfair, but tough fucking shit. Feminism and matriarchy are terrible, and they need to be suppressed. And in order to suppress that, it's worth oppressing women, all women, without exception, because it's fucking terrible. Feminism and matriarchy is the death of civilization and progress and everything good. It's the fucking negation of everything worthwhile. It's fucking terrible, and it needs to be stamped out. And that's why it's worth oppressing all women without exception, regardless of merit. Regardless of their individual qualities or capabilities, they don't belong certain places. In the military, probably in tech fields, there are many others. It's open to debate. But what's not open to debate is the idea that this meritocracy, or this naive view of meritocracy taken out of context, is really a slippery slope, and it's a foot in the door towards cascading degeneracy and parasitism and weakness and political correctness, the suppression of truth, because they're fundamentally hostile to truth. Their feelings can't handle the truth. And, it's really counterproductive to have that in a serious workplace where people are trying to do serious work, providing serious products and services, and now you've got to cater to the fucking feelings of a bunch of whiny, histrionic, snowflake bitches. Fuck that shit, okay? Just fuck that shit. And if you have to be unfair to some individuals to keep that from happening, tough fucking luck. Be unfair, alright? I'm tired of that shit.